Personally, I don't think I made the most out of my university experience. I need to learn, and I am very interested in entrepreneurship and startups. I basically started working as a customer success intern, and that was my way into the startup world. So our goal is to become a replacement for a personal trainer, right? We work with a lot of well-known professional athletes. So we have Alistair Cook, Katia Jones from Strictly Come Dancing. We have a few Olympians as well.
And we're live. Today I'm sitting with Sunil Jindal, who's a co-founder of Magic. It's an AI personal trainer for your home. If you're joining us for the first time, we're the Bay HQ, and at Mama, we're all about supporting British Asians to achieve their dreams. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy this episode. So let's dive in straight away. When you were growing up, Sunil, what did you want to be? Like, what were your dreams?
Yeah, so good question. So when I was sort of very young, I took up cricket thanks to my dad. He was sort of very passionate about the sport. And because of that, I got, very heavily involved myself. And I was quite fortunate to play cricket for Essex as a kid, as I was growing up. And that sort of helped me to realize, what I am capable of and that I can do, some really awesome things in my life. And that was really the sort of starting point. I started playing a lot of table tennis as a kid as well. I got involved with entrepreneurship at school. We used to do things like selling hoodies on eBay, random things like this, selling sweets in the classroom, all sorts of random things. And this, kind of made me really passionate about entrepreneurship and just pushing myself in general.
And then you went on to study physics, right? Like, what made you choose physics if you're thinking about maybe starting your own business one day?
Yeah, to be honest, when I was at school, I wasn't too sure what I wanted to study at university. I also didn't really know if I wanted to go to university. I think the narrative when you're at school is that you go to university, get a good job, and there's no other options that anyone tells you about. I thought about this, should I go to university? But I didn't really know anybody else who hadn't gone to uni. I didn't know, kind of what the options were. So I just decided to go to university, and I did not know what I wanted to study. I had an interest in entrepreneurship, but I also suppose I wasn't 100% sure, if I wanted to go down that route and what that would involve. So one of my good friends was actually studying physics and had very good sort of physics teachers at school as well. So I was I was quite passionate about the topic, I suppose, but I wouldn't say I was super passionate. I didn't know about Imperial College as well, which is the university I ended up at. It was actually one of my friends. I was in the library one day. He sort of mentioned to me that I should apply to Imperial. And I was like, oh, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's a really good university. So I ended up applying and I got into Imperial. I ended up studying physics. And yeah, that kind of led to where I am now after, a sort of series of steps in between.
So when you're at university as well, did you try to keep up the dream of maybe playing professional sport as well? Or did you put down the back burner?
Yeah, so I played cricket played cricket for Essex when I was about 12. And I sort of exams, I suppose, GCSE started to get in the way. And I kind of stopped playing cricket as much. I also used to play a lot of table tennis, which is actually my main sport at the moment. So my current goal is actually to become top 100 in England, which is another story. But I carried on playing table tennis. I think when you do, sort of study your work, it's important to have other things alongside that to sort of, I suppose, to kind of work alongside it, right? You need a way to vent your stress, but also to take your mind off your work.
So when you're at Imperial then, when was the first seeds of going to the startup world as opposed to maybe a more traditional path that you've seen other people take?
Yeah, so I was, again, very fortunate at university because in my first year when I was in halls, there's a friend of mine, Hakeem, who used to basically live opposite me, and he was very much into, building businesses, and he'd worked on a few projects before. Very, sort of inspiring person, a very, very good friend. And he was part of the Entrepreneur Society at university, and he encouraged me to basically join this entrepreneur weekend where you go in, or startup weekend rather, where you go and you pitch an idea, form a team and build a business. And I had a very tough time in my second year trying to find a flat. Finding a flat in London is super difficult. And I had this idea basically around building a review system for properties. And I pitched this idea at the startup weekend, and I managed to form a really, really good team. And we had just such an awesome time that weekend. The business didn't go anywhere. I still had a lot to learn in my own personal journey, but it was such a good experience. And now I think, along with other things, that was definitely the kind of catalyst for me, going on to start my own thing.
It's interesting as well, because I think so many people, I always think I wasted some of the opportunities at university. So university, you can fail and there's really no consequences of it, right? So you can join societies, you can test something out, you can go to entrepreneur society and you get some of that support. Whereas once you leave, it's a lot harder to find those kind of resources. And it's also, you got that bit of freedom at university, right? Where if you fail, like you said, you just try something else.
Yeah.
And I think maybe now it's a bit harder sometimes for people when they're a bit older, because they feel like if they do something wrong, then people are paying attention, which often isn't even the case. But especially if somebody's listening right now as a university, like make use of those opportunities you've got, right? Because there's a ton of free resources and opportunities out there.
100%. Yeah. I think that's one of the things I think about a lot. And I always tell other people, like, personally, I don't think I made the most out of my university experience. Like, I studied at Imperial, and the sort of people that you meet there, a lot of them are doing like very incredible things right now. A lot of them are, very, very smart people. And I think, one of the kind of important phrases that I always think about is like your network is your net worth, right? And there are quite a few people I know from university, and a lot of them are doing, very, very well now. But there's also like a lot more people that I did not meet, and I wish I put more effort into meeting. Imperial itself like has a ton of societies, I think more than most universities. And there's so many different things you can do. Like you said, I started taking up like gliding, which is kind of like flying, and I was learning how to fly like a glider plane. And Imperial has like a gliding society, and that's one thing, amongst many others that I wish I got involved with more. So 100%, like anybody who's at university now is going into university, I would definitely say make the most of the opportunities, especially because, those 3-4 years or however long you are there for, that time passes very quickly.
Yeah. And like, what did you do once you left university? What was the first step you took?
Yeah, so I actually, towards the end of my time at Imperial, I started working on a couple of my own sort of projects. So again, related to sort of property. One of the things I was helping people do was to find a flat in London. So in my third year, I also had a terrible experience trying to find a flat. It was actually harder than my second year. And there's plenty of stories I can tell about that. And one of the things I realized is that, it's super tough for somebody like me, but I was born in London. I grew up here. I kind of know the market, the environment, how to talk to people. But people coming from abroad, one of the problems they have is the culture can be different. They might not speak the language very well. A lot of them also, like if you're coming from, other countries, I noticed that people typically come before, maybe a week or two before the start of university, and they will spend that time trying to find a flat. They might be staying in a hotel or a friend's house, and it was stressful enough for me, so I can only imagine how stressful it is for them. So I tried to sort of help people find a flat by basically managing the search process and doing viewings. And I was actually on holiday one day in Greece with family, and I was working on this business and kind of just thought, actually, you know what, like there's a lot here that I don't know and I need to learn. That was actually when I sort of applied for a job at Hubble. So Varun, who now is my co-founder, he's very active on social media. He has been for a very long time, and he was always posting about Hubble on Facebook. And I remember he posted one day about sort of intern role at Hubble. And I thought, like the company seems great and I need to learn. And I am very interested in entrepreneurship and startups. So I decided to apply, and I basically started working as a customer success intern. And that was sort of my way into the startup world. It was never like the end goal, but it was kind of my way of getting in. And I spent about 3 months doing this role, and I was very fortunate because then the founders, came up to me and said, we think, you'd be a good product manager for us. And they basically helped to train me up to become a PM, and I got some, external help as well. And I became the first product manager at Hubble. I spent 1.5 years there, and it was genuinely like one of the sort of best learning experiences of my life so far.
And with that role at Hubble as well, right? Because I think, especially for me, when I left university, right, there was no idea of that, I might join a startup. So me and you actually went to the same school. So we've got a very similar background in that way. Then I studied economics at university, and it was all about how do you get into the corporate world. That's all of the focus I was kind of taught about. And I think that's starting to change now. People are a bit more interested in joining startups. And like you said, like, do you just feel like that accelerated your growth so much by being in that environment? And let's say somebody out there is maybe a bit apprehensive about joining a startup where they're early in their career. What advice would you give them, or how could you encourage them to do that same path you did, or open their eyes to that?
Yeah, I suppose firstly, like 100%, I totally agree. Even when I was at university, the sort of typical career path was to join a corporate. And actually even my first year, second, and obviously third year as well, a lot of my friends were spending a lot of time applying to corporate jobs. And the sort of process of applying is pretty long, if you're trying to get into quite a good company. And then there was me, I suppose, kind of being a bit lazy, you can say, and not doing any of this, having no interest in this really. So I was very interested in entrepreneurship, but to be perfectly honest, I did not know kind of, where I was headed. A lot of people were asking me. One of the reasons I studied physics was because physics is a very broad subject and you can go into a lot of things afterwards. So my sort of personal experience, I've worked in quite a few startups actually. So I've done quite a bit of like freelancing. And because of that, I've been able to sort of see different startups. And I think I would not like dismiss corporate companies. I think like if I was younger, I probably would have. But I think you get different experiences in both environments, right? So working in a corporate, I know you can, learn a lot of good things. But I think like just huge credit to like the team at Hubble. When I joined, I was part of the founding team and I was the youngest in the company. Everybody there was like somebody, I looked up to and I learned a lot from. So all of these people had experience, either working in a corporate company or doing other things. And so I basically went in, I was kind of like a sponge and I just absorbed a lot of things. And I was also, part of this sort of accelerator program that we went on. And again, I was kind of surrounded by some very sort of senior people from companies like PayPal and TransferWise, who are, called Wise now. And because of that, I just learned a huge amount. So I think, the advice I would give to, somebody who's maybe coming out of university or even, doesn't matter what point in your life you're at, but I would say, if you sort of join the right startup or the right company, like it doesn't matter if it's a startup, as long as you surround yourself with the right people who you can learn a lot from, people you look up to, who treat you well, you can really accelerate your growth. I saw that, when I was sort of comparing myself to my friends and, meeting up with them, whatever, I would see that a lot of them were, especially in the corporate world, working on like Excel spreadsheets or whatever. And there was me doing some like crazy awesome stuff, with some crazy awesome people. And culture is key, right? Who you surround yourself with is so important.
Yeah, and like you said, it's like there's benefits for both paths, right? Going corporate career or startup. But I think a lot of people will just only consider one path. And like I said, if you consider the other half too, then you've got different opportunities available. And it also makes you've got less blinkered, right? You can say like, I could go down the corporate path and learn this sort of thing, or I go to a startup space and learn this. But having both those options on the table means that you've got much more flexibility in where you go later in life as well. And you mentioned as well how you met Varun. Well, you were following Varun first, then you worked with him at Hubble, and he's obviously now your co-founder of Magic. How did you guys get together to start building Magic, or where did the idea come from?
Yeah, it's crazy really. So I've actually known Varun from school. Varun is, a little bit older than I am, but we knew each other a little bit at school. Like, we didn't speak that much. And it was mainly through Hubble where we became quite good friends. He hired me and I was, very grateful for that. And I was working very closely with him. And we just became, very good friends. We kind of live quite close to each other as well. And then when I left Hubble, I started working on a load of different things. And Varun was, he was still working at Hubble. I think he started working part-time and we started going to, Westfield Stratford, I think like once a week just to kind of meet for lunch and just sort of work together. And he would always like talk about some sort of crazy idea, like he's very good at like sort of, coming up with ideas and doing his research. And Magic was actually his idea. So he did, I think like he had his own sort of personal fitness journey, and I've also worked a lot in fitness myself as well. And I remember him telling me about this sort of crazy idea, that he was sort of exploring. I think he sort of, took inspiration from a few different companies and also kind of his own, kind of insights and learnings, and just formed this idea of Magic. And he started working on, this sort of very kind of basic concept and prototype. And I was actually on holiday at the time in the Canary Islands. So I was traveling around, and I'm pretty sure I'd just come out of the swimming pool at the time or something, and he was like, I've got this thing I'm working on, I need your help, can we chat? And we started talking, and he just told me that, he's Selfridges have sort of reached out and, asked if we can launch our product in their store. And, Varun, he's a very good friend. And I think we work well together because we have, kind of different skill sets. And I'm very much sort of product and tech minded, whereas he's like, more sort of marketing and business and finance. And so I sort of, came on board as a co-founder. We started working on this together. We built, this product. We launched in Suffrages. We've also launched in situ live in Westwood Shepherd's Bush as well. And yeah, we've really come a long way since those early days.
Like looking at it from the challenge perspective, right? Of you had the idea. Well, Varun had the idea of what Magic Mirror could do, the Magic AI Mirror could do. How do you then go about making that reality? Like, what were the steps you did yourself when you come on board to make it go from ideation to here's something which people can now look at in Selfridges and all these different places you mentioned?
Yeah, I think like this kind of goes back to my time at Hubble, right? So Varun and I, we often talk about this. We're like, a lot of people do often ask that question, like, how do you go about starting a business? Like, how do you do it? Some people have an idea, and I've sort of seen, I've been a part of a lot of different startups, and I've seen the chaos that goes on inside a lot of them. I'm like, how are they kind of progressing? So I think one of the key things is, having a sort of good process in place. So being a product manager and, kind of building this product, I think one of the first things you got to think about is prioritization, right? There's a million different features that you could, sort of build for this kind of product. But it's about identifying firstly, what are the sort of key problems you need to solve? What is the sort of MVP? What is the most basic version of this product that you can sort of launch with? And user research is the sort of foundation of this, right? So you're building this for people. You need to understand the people, how they work, what they think, how they feel. And it's really about talking to these people, which is actually what a lot of companies don't do, which is super important, So the starting point for the business was really understanding our market, understanding our potential users. So yeah, we sort of, set about talking to them, understanding the pain points, and then building our MVP. So once we had a clear idea of the problems and a clear idea of the solutions, we just built this kind of basic version, which is actually the version we launched with in Suffrages. And yeah, we got some traction from there, and after that just continue building more, continue learning, and just build more features. But obviously there's a lot more to it as well, right? This is just the product side. There's the whole business side of fundraising and building your team. And yeah, again, it really just goes back to Hubble. Obviously I've learned a lot working in other places too, but I think Hubble was really kind of the starting point, and very important sort of part of my life to help me get to where I am now.
And you mentioned as well about how you worked for many different startups before you came to where you are today. And that also gives you a good way of understanding how to hire people for Magic as well. So before we started recording, actually, he was telling me a really good way about what he's doing. And then I was like, we're not recording yet, save that for the podcast. So tell us, how do you hire people for Magic?
Yeah, so I think one of the constraints we have, right, is that we are a very small, we are a small team, right? We're a startup. We don't have the resources of a corporate or, a sort of scale up. And I having a physics background, I think one of the things I've learned is to really think things through from first principles and always question, our assumptions. And the typical approach to hiring is put out a job spec, set up a load of first round calls with people, and then, sort of go through the stages. It's kind of, a typical sort of process that people follow. But I actually sort of learned this quite a few years ago when I was looking for a job myself. And I just learned a lot of stuff about the hiring process, and there are a lot of biases in the hiring process, and there still are, even with my new process, which I'll talk about. But what I tend to do is I will put together a short Loom video where I will basically give more information about the role, the company. When you do these first round calls, you always notice that people always ask the same questions. You talk about the same things, right? You're just wasting a lot of time. You don't have that time, but also energy as well. You don't have the energy. So I would put together this Loom video, send it across to, the shortlisted people, the people I've shortlisted, and give them the information they need. And then I will give them a test task to do. So I'll be like, I'll ask myself first, what is it that we're trying to learn or ascertain from, these people to determine if they are suitable for this role. And I will put together, a good task, or somebody in the team will. If it's design, I tend to know quite a lot about design. So when we were hiring a designer, I put together this task, I send it across, and then I will, obviously evaluate this and shortlist further. And it's only then, which, to be honest, even before jumping on a call, I might, ask a few further questions if I feel like somebody hasn't answered well enough, but I see potential in what they've said, or, reading their CV or past experience. And I would only jump on a call with them at the very final stage when I've maybe shortlisted to 4 or 5 people. And that's when, I would kind of really dig in to, like finding out if they are suitable for this role. I think, kind of being a product manager, I think I've learned a lot from doing like user interviews and talking to people. And I think I'm pretty good at like asking the right questions and really digging into, into things. And especially when you are, an early stage company, hiring the right people is super important, right? Like it's key. I've sort of been part of startups where they have hired people who have stayed for a few months and maybe they've been let go because they're not good enough or they've decided to move on. There's a lot of time and energy that gets invested into hiring. And training them up, right? It's important you sort of make good decisions when hiring. And we've seen that, like we have a very good team at Magic and it's helped us so much. Like, if we didn't have these people, things would be a million times harder. So yeah, hopefully that helps, but that's my process.
How many people do you have now at Magic? Like how much has it grown?
Yeah, we're still quite a small team. So there's about 6 or 7 of us. So I still remember, maybe a year or so ago, it was just Varun and myself. And when we, sort of launched in Suffrages, we were sort of lugging the mirror through the back doors of the cinema in Suffrages. When we were sort of setting up initially, we brought it over in an Uber and things have changed so much. We've still got a long way to go, but the company we've progressed a lot since those early days.
And so Varun's obviously been on the podcast before and he mentioned how you had quite a good fundraise for your seed round and that's all helping you now to scale further. What have you been using that money for now? What's the progression? So Varun would have come on, I want to say about 6 months ago. So I guess what's happened like in 2023? Like how have you progressed since we last heard from Varun?
Yeah, so we have basically, we've launched like an Android version of our sort of product and we've basically like added a lot more sort of exercises, a lot more tracking. So one of the key things that we do is when you're doing an exercise, we can basically count your reps and help correct your form. So we've kind of progressed a lot further with this. We've added in sort of more features to the product as well. We have like, a very good team. So we've changed that design quite a lot. The app is like, it's really come a long way. I don't know if you mentioned, but we also work with a lot of like well-known professional athletes. So we have like Alistair Cook, Katia Jones from Strictly Come Dancing. We have a few Olympians as well. And these people are all producing content for our mirror. So when you're doing a workout on the mirror, you're basically learning, from somebody like Alistair Cook or Katia Jones. And we've been working really hard to sort of, push this out.
And you mentioned as well like how a big part of your role is about the user feedback, right? What was some of the feedback that maybe you got in the earlier days which surprised you and led you to take the product in a different direction to maybe you initially thought you would do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if there's anything that really surprised us because I think we did do our user research pretty well. Like we do try to stay very close to our customers and, talk to them often. I think, that is sort of super crucial. We did have, I think like any company, like we do sort of, we have seen some problems with our product, which is very normal, things that we can improve, which every good company, should be doing. So we keep, progressing and we do sort of push out updates every couple of weeks and sort of, move forward as fast as we can.
And then like going forwards now as well, what's the vision you've got? So obviously, you've iterated the product, it's getting better and better. You've got these huge names on board. I saw you guys at London Tech Week as well, demonstrating there. What's the vision for like the company? Like, where do you want Magic to get to?
Yeah, so our goal is to become a replacement for a personal trainer, right? And I think we are definitely moving in that direction. There's still a lot more we can do. There's a number of like different things, we sort of can work on. We actually went on a trip recently to the Far East just to we went to an expo just to check out what's going on out there and what we can learn. One of the sort of interesting kind of directions we're looking to go into is to provide kind of more guidance to the user around the sort of optimal weight for them to use. So, when you have a personal trainer, they are there for accountability purposes. They, kind of motivate you, which is also another thing we need to sort of, do more. But they also, help you to sort of have the correct form, which is something we do. But also they will kind of set a program for you and, kind of guide you on what weights you should be using. They might even spot you as well, right? So this is kind of one of the things that we're looking to explore, and we're trying to understand how we can do this using technology. And this for us is alongside many other things as well, but that is definitely a very interesting direction we could go into, but also like branching out into different modalities as well. So we focus very much on strength at the moment. There's things like yoga, there's dancing, boxing, and all of this is possible. It's just about having the resources and, you know, the kind of time to do this. So it's very, very interesting sort of few months ahead for us. Very interesting future. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Is it something that you're most excited about yourself, or you can't wait for that to get to that stage?
Yeah, I think a lot of different things. I think the weight guidance itself is something for me personally that is super interesting, because I think one of the problems that people have is kind of knowing or remembering what weight they previously used, right? But I think also perhaps more importantly, getting those few extra reps at the end of the set. Having like a spotter it's just so useful, and like your muscle tends to grow when you're struggling, right? It's not when you're doing those first few reps, it's when you're doing the last few, and it's when you're really pushing yourself. But like, at least from my experience, when you're doing those last few reps, there's a big difference when you have a spotter versus having no spotter, because a spotter will really help you to push yourself. And if we can sort of replicate this using technology, I think that is super interesting. But there's also other things as well. So we've also considered exploring things like augmented reality. So if you think about running versus playing football, right? So when you're in both activities, you might be burning the same number of calories, but when you're playing football, you tend to enjoy it more because you're focused much more on the competition rather than the exercise, right? Yeah. And one of the ideas we thought about is basically adding more gamification aspects into what we do. So if you think about our device, it's basically like a big sort of 4-foot mirror that doubles up as a screen. And imagine seeing yourself in the reflection on the mirror, and overlaid with your reflection is this kind of, you know, virtual image that's being projected by the screen. Maybe a good example is like if you're doing like a shoulder press, you have some coins that sort of help to guide your movement so you have the right technique. And, you know, your focus when you're doing this is on earning those coins. It's not necessarily so much on the kind of, you know, the pain you're going through, right?
Yeah.
I think that is like a super interesting direction we could go into, but I don't see it happening like anytime this year. But that, yeah, like if that does happen, that for me is like a real game changer.
So what you mentioned about the weights here as well, because I think when it's the final few reps, like you said, I know that my own form gets terrible then, right? But doing it with, like you said, a spotter where you can see, because obviously I've tested out the product as well, where it tells you when your technique isn't as good. And I think it's a really interesting way of being able to know, like when you're doing those last few reps, when you're pushing too far and when you're doing it to the right level. Because obviously if you're doing those last few reps and the form is terrible, you're probably just going to injure yourself. Whereas that can tell you, okay, you're still doing it with good form, you can probably do another one. And I think that's a really interesting way to be able to know. It's always like when you go to the gym, you don't really know, am I doing the right number or not? You're trying to gauge in your own head. Whereas obviously that can tell you, actually, you can probably do one more because your last rep was really good.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to move into quick fire questions now just because of time. So first one is, who are 3 British Asians that you'd love to shout out that you think people should be paying attention to or listening?
Yeah, good question. I think first person would probably be, well, one of my brothers. So Rahul, he's still very young. He's only 21 years old, but he's done a lot of awesome things already in his life. He's got a YouTube channel called Tech Force. He's, you know, had like millions of views for his videos, and I always think of him as like kind of a better version of me. Like he's played cricket for Essex, but for longer than I did. He's played table tennis for Essex, again, longer than I've played, you know, high level. And he's just sort of, you know, graduated from university. He's about to sort of start looking for a job. And yeah, very sort of like interested to see like where he sort of goes in the next few years. He's got so much potential. And then I'd also sort of shout out one of my good friends, Hakeem Javed, who I mentioned earlier, like very sort of big inspiration for me from, you know, back at university. He's done a lot of like awesome things as well. He's part of the founding team at Blocks, which was this modular smartwatch. He was, you know, part of, I think he was the CTO at Indie Juice, who, you know, have done very well. And he just works on like many interesting projects. He's done very well for himself. He's, yeah, like just a super great guy. And I think the third person would probably be our head of engineering, like Chirag Patel. So Chirag has, you know, like I think alongside everyone else in our team as well, he's done a lot of like, you know, great work for the company. And, you know, without him, like our product would not be where it is now. He's like a very sort of capable engineer and yeah, just very good at his job.
The next one is, If people listening right now want to find out more about you, more about magic, where should they go to?
Yeah, so we have a website, Magic. So magic.fit is where you can check us out. You can also follow me on LinkedIn as well. So just feel free to search. I'm normally at the top of search results, so you should be able to find me there.
And then if people listening might be able to help you, what's something that you need help with or that Magic needs help with right now?
Yeah, I think for me personally, probably one of the big things is mentorship. So I think one thing I could do better at is sort of having people around me that I can learn from. Like I have, a number of like very good friends who, sort of help to guide me. But I think, it's super important who you surround yourself with. And I think if there's anybody out there who feels, they can kind of help me or help the company, please do reach out. I'd love to sort of chat further.
So thanks so much for coming on. Have you got any final words for the audience?
No, thank you so much. I think, I just, like I said, I'm very, kind of grateful for being invited onto the podcast. I think I don't normally do a lot of podcasts. I tend to sort of speak more through my work than through words. But, you've had a lot of like awesome guests on this show, and I'm very privileged to sort of be a part of it. So thank you.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It means a huge amount to us. And we don't think you realise how important you are. Because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you leave us a 5-star review, it makes a world of difference. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here, to inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians, if you do those things, you can help us achieve that mission. And you can help us make a bigger impact. And by doing that, it means we can get bigger guests, we can host more events, we can do more for the community. So you can play a huge part. So thank you so much for supporting us.